Mr. Vice President, Mr. Speaker, members of the Senate, of the House of Representatives, yesterday, a date which will live in infamy.
Hi, my name is Bill Ryan, and welcome to my world. This is Series 3 in my tapes for Donald J. Trump, Can You Hear Me? And it's about 9/11. And like most people, I actually believed and trusted the government to tell us the truth. And as all of us in the world come out of the ether, especially in the United States, we realize we were lied to, and lied to a lot. And so this video is primarily for everybody in the world, so that you can understand that this stuff that's happening within the government is not us. We're not behind this. There's other things going on. Now, because we're in the United States, we have the Constitution. And the Constitution gives us rights. Freedom of speech, the right to bear arms, the right to choose whatever religion you want. So our world is a little bit different than everybody else's. But we all pretty much want the same thing. A safe place to live, good food, a place to take care of our children. We all want the same thing. So all of us, regardless of the government we're under, pretty much want the same thing. And in the United States, we have elected officials. And there are approximately 637 people that we trust, we vote for. And if you're a criminal element and you want to take over a country, well, you only have to bribe 637 people. You want to get something through Congress? Here's $1 million. Oh, okay, yeah, I'll vote for that, whatever you want. So it's kind of easy to take over a government. And in the past, I'm going to say 100 years, that's what we seem to be witnessing in this country. It is being run and operated by foreigners. It's not even people in this country. So the federal government is not truly representing us. And so what they do in the world is not us. So it's something else. So I wanted to try to understand what 9/11 was all about. And again, I use my system of the 5 W's. So the first thing we want to do is talk about where. Well, we know where it was. That was New York City. And when was 9/11? And why seems to be strictly about war. And the buildings, the World Trade Centers, were heavily covered with asbestos. So the people that owned it, they didn't want these buildings. They wanted them gone. They were bad. So the motive is war, to enrich the war industry, and asbestos to get rid of these buildings. And Larry owned these buildings, and they were literally a controlled demolition. So the thing that we have to look at, as well as many things to be covered today, is the evidence that was presented to us. And supposedly Al-Qaeda was behind the whole thing. And it's been my personal opinion, discovering this now, that it wasn't Al-Qaeda, it was al-Qaeda, and they're the ones that are over the top of all of these military organizations. They're the front man. They protect them, they guard them, and the FBI is in on it. They're all covering up what happened on 9/11. And if you have any doubts at all, you simply look at the report that was presented to Congress on 9/11. And when you get into it, you can see there's volumes of information here that tell you it was all a cover-up. This speaks volumes of what they're doing. And what they're doing is lying to the American people and covering it all up because they don't want you to know. Oh, it's a secret. We can't tell you. So now we need to know who. And the who apparently is the Illuminati, a secret organization started approximately 200 years ago to take over the world, to own and operate everything. And that's all of us. All of us that are running around here like sheep, believing all the lies that we're being told. And these people, it is their intention through the United Nations to implement Agenda 21. Agenda 21. And if you read anything about Agenda 21, it is to eliminate governments. So all governments all over the planet are to become states. So the United States of America isn't going to be a state anymore. It's isn't going to be a country anymore. It's going to be a state. The Constitution has been completely circumvented by these people. And these people, and that's just a club, and made up of many clubs, and these people who are in that club own all the banks, and the banks own all of these companies that are strictly interested in war. So we get back to 9/11. It's all about war and profit, which is called war profiteering. But it doesn't matter because they own everything. They can do whatever they want. They own all the congressmen, the senators, they own the UN, they own it all. They can do whatever they want. You're not going to stop them. And they don't care if you know. This is not a secret. This is all very open and understands that's what they're doing. They don't care if you know. So the other who is people who bought into, and there's a massive amount of people involved in this 9/11 situation, this 9/11 murder of approximately 3,000 people. Now these people are short selling stock of American Airlines. They knew ahead of time American Airlines was going into the World Trade Center, or theoretically was to be blamed, and so they short sold stock. Now the cost of this 15-year war has been approximately, so it's reported, approximately 400,000 lives. Now if this is what they're telling us is the number, it most likely is double that. It's at least 500,000 people. American soldiers, the wounded, not even including the wounded, and all the Muslims, all the Arabs. This was a war against a race of people. And the disturbing part is when you start to, and there's many people much brighter and smarter than I am that have diagnosed this and looked at it a lot closer than I'm capable of. And one of the things, one of the many things that you have to look at here are the people that are involved in this. So, for example, there was well, let me give you a little history first. Got to have a little history so that we can look at the present and then be able to look into the future, which is what I'm going to do. So, Albert Pike in 1871, 147 years ago, wrote a letter, and he talked about the First World War. Now, this was before the First World War, and he detailed what the Illuminati needed to do to get this war started, to cause people to fight and take on communism, and or to either take it on or to get into it, get control of the people so you can get control of the money. Then he spoke of, in his letter, the Second World War, which he talked about Nazism, 147 years before the Nazis rose to power. And he talked of creating a state of Israel in Palestine. How could he do this 147 years before these things were taking place? I mean, in the past. So then he spoke of the Third World War, where the Illuminati would again take on the Islamic world. And after all of us are tired and wore out from this endless war that we have witnessed throughout this time period, he talks about moving into the manifestation of the pure doctrine of Lucifer. So he was a Satanist. So everything you're looking at, you have to back up and say, okay, what's really going on here? Because you cannot trust these people. Whatever they say, just back away, they're lying. Whatever they say, they're lying. And they don't care if you know. It doesn't matter. They own it all. It doesn't matter. The secret courts, the secret prisons, the FEMA relocation camps that are everywhere that don't do anything to help people when they're in a natural disaster. They own it all and they don't care if you know. So, going back to the World Trade Center, there was an art group that had access to the Twin Towers, and they were there for a minimum of 4 years. And they could go anywhere inside those two buildings they wanted to. They had construction equipment, and they were given access, they were given a floor to operate on. And the interesting thing is that these artists were from Israel. Israel's our ally. We're partners in all of this. And they lived and they worked in the World Trade Center, specifically, or also including the 91st and 92nd floors. Now, before 9/11, they actually lit up a series of those floors and put the E-Team. Okay, well, the name of this operation was gelatin. What is gelatin? It's an explosive. Okay, and they were, and that was their name. And they were also calling themselves the E-Team. So right there on the World Trade Center, on a number of floors, they have lit up the E-team. And where do you think one of those planes, supposed planes, went into? That exact same location. You can look all this up. It's not a secret. I don't even think they care that you know. So, this Israeli art team allegedly had hundreds of boxes of BB-18 fuse holders, which is used for detonation. So they could go anywhere they want and put these detonation fuses anywhere they wanted. That's kind of disturbing that they would have that kind of access to these buildings freely. There was nobody stopping them. It was like they all knew what they were doing. Well, at least the ones in power. These people, they knew what was going on. And one of the disturbing things is that Donald wrote about this in a book that was published before the towers went down. How would he know that this was going to happen? It must have been common knowledge. Larry apparently knew all about it. He bought the World Trade Center, allegedly bought the World Trade Center, and doubled the insurance 6 weeks before they went down. He knew what was going on. One of his other buildings, building number 7, went down. There was nothing. There was hardly even a fire, and it went straight down, and it looked like a controlled demolition. And that's what everybody is saying. Why did that building go down? It was a controlled demolition. So the question then becomes, what did the planes really do all that? Could they have that much power? Well, if you know anything about planes, they're made out of aluminum. So when a plane gets in a bad storm and hail damage, it'll practically bring that plane down. It'll poke holes all through it, and that airplane, those airplanes should have smashed against those I-beams and fallen down into the street, and they didn't. Now, this is a hunk of I-beam right here, or of iron. And you can't tell me for a second that an airplane can go through that. It can't. So that particular sample right there is about 3/4 of an inch thick. The I-beams that were in these towers were, not I-beams, columns, were 4 inches to 2 inches. As they got taller, they got thinner. 4 inches to 2 inches. And it's double, so it's 2 inches plus 2 inches with a space in between. And an airplane is going to go through that? No, of course it's not. It can't. So there's theories out there about the planes being a hologram, a 5.6 airborne holographic projector can produce an artificial plane. And you just wouldn't think that that was humanly possible, but you can buy today a hologram and a hologram projector that projects a full-size image. So if this is available to the public today, you can bet, logic says, yeah, they probably could have done that. There's a lot of details, a lot of information out there about how to project and how to use mirrors and project this image that could fool people. Now, when I first heard this, I thought, oh, that's idiotic, that's crazy, you can't do that. I don't believe that for a second. But then when you look at the evidence that's available closely, it's it's kind of creepy that that these things do look like they're possible. There are several images of the so-called jet going right into the building. No debris, no nothing. It just disappeared into the building, and then there was an explosion. Well, airplanes don't do that. So when you look at the evidence closely, the hole that's in the building right after it disappears, and there's that explosion, the metal is in straight lines. Airplanes don't cut 2-inch columns in straight lines. They can't do. A wingtip can't go through 2-inch iron. It can't do it. This would not happen. So that's a red alert right there that this is very phony. Then when you look at the pieces besides the straight lines, the metal is pushed out, not in. So this, again, it just doesn't make any sense, and it starts to look like the gelatin team, the E team, was planting explosives all over the building. And the firemen reported hearing explosions, hundreds of them, and they were being detonated deliberately for a reason, which I'll go into in a moment. So the artificial holograms can be placed in the sky, and it could be done by heating the atmosphere with radio waves or microwaves. That's very important to remember that. Now, the entire area was covered in microspheres, and the microspheres are the dust that was all over the streets. So when you look at the buildings closely, they literally turned into dust. So for me personally, I wanted to understand how it's humanly possible for an aluminum airplane to crash into 2-inch thick red iron columns and not fall apart. It never made any sense to me, and I was always very suspicious. But only recently have I woken up, have I come out of the ether. And here's a piece of angle iron, 3/4 of an inch thick, and I can tell you it's quite heavy. And you can see it would be very difficult for an airplane to go through this, knowing that hail can destroy an airplane, knowing that it going through a chain link fence can total it. How is it going to survive 2-inch thick red iron beams? Doesn't make any sense. So only when I became aware of the word dustification did the light bulb in my head start to go off. Dr. Judy Wood wrote a book called Where Did the Towers Go? And she's done several videos, and through her videos it's extremely clear something else happened other than what we have been told, the lies we have been told. And it's extremely disturbing. I found it very hard to accept the information I was being shown, because probably much like you, I don't want to believe this. I don't want to believe a government would kill its own people so that we could go to war and kill other people. I just didn't want to believe that that was humanly possible, that ability was in a human being. Obviously, these are not human beings. They're something else. They're not caring, loving, good, decent people. They're horrible creatures, and I'm not one of them. I make that perfectly clear. Her book, what really woke me up was the fact that she had detailed how the towers literally turn to dust, and I-beams just don't turn to dust. Now, I have my theories, as everybody has their theories, but that just doesn't happen. There is possibly a way that could happen, but obviously there is a way because it happened. You can see that happened. And when you look at her videos and how she specifically picks apart every aspect of what happened. And it's mind-numbing to think that people in this country would do this to their own people. But that's apparently what happened. So her book is extremely fascinating, and her videos are something that it's a must-see if you're ever to completely wake up. Another person that I'd never heard of, which is William Rodriguez, and he is the last man out of building number 2. He's an American hero. This is an amazing human being, and virtually it's all been swept under the rug. His testimony of what took place in that building is the only testimony by the 9/11 Commission that was taken behind closed doors and not made public. You didn't see what happened in his words because they don't want you to see it. It's just another part of the cover-up. If there's no cover-up, why don't you expose his testimony? And his testimony never ended up in the book, the 9/11 Commission report on what happened. It never ended up in the book. He heard explosions in the basement. He smelled ammonia and sulfur. That's critical. He heard many explosions. He heard he was burned without fire, and as he was leaving, the building was vibrating. Now that's critical because of my theory of what's going on. Now, after I had heard both these people and their understanding and their belief as to what was happening, I realized that I had written a book called In Search of the Eye, and in that book I detailed my understanding of everything, absolutely everything, all matter, life, the Big Bang, before the Big Bang, our spirit, our soul, what exactly we are, and my personal relationship to the world. I wanted to see that and understand that. And the evidence that was presented to me by these two people, these two individuals, clearly coincided with what I had written about in this book. And basically, you have to understand how things work on a very simple, pragmatic system. So, what I think took place in the World Trade Center on 9/11, besides the detonation of explosions, bombs inside the building, what I believe took place was it was brought down through vibration and microwave, which disassembled the I-beams, that or the channel iron, box iron. That's what I believe happened. So what you have to understand to get all this is basically a radio wave looks like this. And it goes, they're everywhere. They go through us, they go through the walls, you can listen to your radio, and that's a radio wave. The police talk on radio waves. Television used to come through on radio waves. The discovery of radar was because of radio waves. And a radio technician in around World War II was broadcasting, and he had a window, and he could look out his window and see ships going by in front of him. And as he's broadcasting, and he had a scope so he could keep track of his output, and when he was broadcasting, a ship would go by, he'd get a signal that would come back. And that was the origin of radar. So in World War II, when England was about to collapse, they had discovered a thing called microwave, a much smaller, much tighter wavelength. And that's what we use to heat up food, water, things of that nature. So my theory is that all life boils down to basically two things. One is dark energy, which is everywhere, and two is the essence of matter. And to understand it, you have to understand, you have to look at what an atom is. All right? That's an atom. Doesn't matter what kind of an atom, it's an atom. And it has an outside shell, like an egg, and an inner core. Now, most atoms, the inner core, if it were the size of a dime, the outer core would be the size of a stadium. So, you know, you can fit 50,000 people in here, including a football field. So the span is great. Now, if you take several atoms and you put them together, you have a clear understanding of what I'm talking about. Now, each one of these atoms has space inside them, the auditorium, and they have space next to them. So all around them you have more space. Now, it's my belief that that space is dark energy, and this outer shell and the inner core are made up of what I call the essence of matter. And when you remove or break the outer shell, the dark energy escapes and it goes back wherever it is, which is everywhere. And the essence of matter, which I believe is string energy or ring energy, returns to its natural state and is compressed by the dark energy. It's pushed back to its smallest or essence of matter. So when you have a microwave involved in heating up metal, you know, don't put utensils in a microwave because they'll spark, they'll blow up. What happens is you can put a spoon in a microwave and it won't do anything. And that's because the energy is flowing around. But when you take the tips of a fork are what first start to explode and spark because the energy is trapped up there and it superheats that metal. Now imagine there's one more type of radio wave or microwave that I know of, and that's called, it looks like this, and it's called a sawtooth microwave. It's very small and I believe extremely powerful and has the ability to literally separate atoms. So now bear in mind what I'm talking about here is you have this big chunk of metal, you hit it and it rings. What's happening is all these atoms are vibrating when I ring that metal like that. So that means clearly that this is not one piece, although it looks like one piece. It's actually all these atoms vibrating. So they're not connected. They're held together, but they're not connected. So if you can vibrate the metal enough and use the sawtooth microwave, you can get it to, I believe, separate. Because what's happened is when the towers turn to dust, and point of clarification, when I think of dust, I think of what's behind my computer and underneath my bed. This is not dust. This is a iron microspheres, extremely tiny, boiled, cooked, eviscerated pieces of I-beam that are mixed with many different chemicals. So literally all of this became a soup in the air as it was superheated with these sawtooth microwave. And people in the towers complained of being burned when there was no fire. And the only way you can burn people is with a microwave. So it's the only thing that logically makes sense that at the very top of the towers, if you pay close attention, you can see the very highest point, there's an explosion. And that explosion is the start. It's to reduce the tips to their the smallest fragmented pieces as they can, so that the microwave can go to the top and do its job, which is to disintegrate the columns. And that's what I believe happened. Those people in those towers were baked to death. They were poisoned with explosions, with the smell of sulfur and ammonia. These were all parts of weapons. They weren't. It wasn't a plane that crashed into the building. It just wasn't. It couldn't be. So that's my theory as to what happened that could literally turn these enormous towers, these enormous columns of iron into dust. And I actually tried talking to a fireman, a local fireman here, about this. And I said, you know, it doesn't make any sense that the towers turned to dust. And he was very defensive. He was from New York. He was there at the time. And he says, oh, there was lots of debris. I don't believe those pictures. How can you not believe hundreds of videos of the towers turning to dust? How can you not believe that? And the amazing thing, the guy was just in denial. He just didn't want to believe or he was brainwashed. I don't know. But he said, this is the amazing part. He said, oh, those towers were designed to turn to dust when they fell apart. I couldn't believe he said that. They were designed to fall apart. Why were they designed to fall apart? Well, so that they didn't fall on other buildings and do damage to other buildings and hurt other people or kill other people. Okay, so the 3,000 people that were in the tower, it's okay for the building to turn to dust and kill them, just as long as it doesn't hit any other buildings. Well, I don't know how to tell this guy this, but these buildings were designed to withstand an airplane crashing into them. That's what they were designed for. There is no amount of heat that can melt I-beams that's in a jet engine, that's jet fuel. It won't melt I-beams. It takes twice as much heat to melt an I-beam. And then when you're melting it, you've got a melted I-beam. It doesn't go away. It doesn't turn to dust. So the only thing that logically makes any sense is the dustification was done through microwaves. This was well thought out, well pre-planned, and well executed. And the scary part is the majority of the people in this country are still in denial. You just don't want to believe this, and it's understandable. I get it. I don't want to believe it either, but it's true. And we have to wake each other up and pass along this intelligence and share it with each other. If it's right, if it's wrong, at least let's start talking about this, because what happened doesn't make any sense, and it needs to be looked at closely. So to understand what else could be going on to the to metal, I have a small bar here, and Thomas Brown invented a way of elevating, of moving metal by positively charging one side, and then there would be a negative charge on the opposite side. And when he did this with electricity, he actually made the metal move. Okay, if you positively charge the top, negatively charge the bottom, you'd have lift. And his theory was, and these are things that he did, and he did them in the 30s. So we're talking before World War II. He had this technology, and that was all swept up and disappeared. The concept is very interesting, because when you see these alleged spaceships in the sky and they make 90-degree turns, you think, well, you can't do that because you'll go smashing into the side of the ship. You can't do that. But when you've altered the gravity, which is what I talked about in the book, when you alter the gravity, you literally, there is no gravity. You are under the control of these positive and negative forces that lift you and move you around, and there is no gravity. Now, it's been said that these modern day war planes do that exact thing on the tips of the wings. They positively charge them, and the articles that I've been reading said these planes can run forever because there's no fuel. They're not using any conventional fuel. Now, so if you were to mix the microwave, and I'm theorizing, and the ability to positively and negatively charge iron, you would have this metal trying to move. So if you did it extremely fast, you might actually separate the atoms that are holding the metal together. It's the only thing that I can think of that possibly makes any sense. Tesla was working on things like this, and he had an invention where strictly based on vibration, that he attached to a column of a building that he happened to be in, and he was working with getting the vibrations properly synchronized, and within a short amount of time, the building was coming down, and he had to disconnect it real fast and act like it never happened because he was destroying the building. So if you mix with that these sciences that we know are out there, it starts to make sense. You can start to see this happening. The other thing is that there were men on 9/11 that came to the United States to record a video of the buildings coming down. Now, these men just happen to be from Israel, and they're known as the Five Dancing Israelis. So they were there videotaping the whole thing and celebrating. What a horrible thing. They had prior knowledge that this was going to happen. I don't know that it was even a secret in Israel. But clearly, these people had, or appear to have, prior knowledge. How could they know to aim the cameras right at the tower and wait for it to happen? How could they know this? It was also reported that two people from Israel came forward and said that they were given a warning to stay away from the World Trade Center on that day because something bad was going to happen. So now you have a lot of collusion here, a lot of people knowing all about this, and that's not good. This was all premeditated, all done with the intent to blame the Muslim and Arab people. With regards to sticking the blame on these people, two passports were found of the so-called 19 perpetrators of this crime. So now we're intended to believe that an enormous jet goes into the side of the building, killing everybody, and there's not a body found. There's not no parts are found from this plane. They didn't go crashing to the ground, but yet a passport appears. How did the passport survive, but not a shred of this human being survived? There are no airport videos of these 19 men at the airport getting on planes. It never happened. There's no record of that happening. 6 of the people that are on the list of the 19 have come forward and said they had nothing to do with it. They're not dead. They weren't on the planes. They actually can prove they were in other countries when this happened. Very disturbing. But what was the motive behind blaming them? Blaming a whole race of people. And I wrote a book called Jesus Christ of Canon. And in that book, I detail in story format how the people in Palestine, who I feel very bad for, were the victim of these very powerful people. And they literally took their land, and if they didn't want to leave, they'd kill them. And they just took their land and gave it to the Jewish people. Now, why would you do that? That doesn't make any sense. You give the Jewish people their homeland. France created a declaration giving away another country's property, and they did that before World War, in the early 20s. And then England came along and did the same thing. Well, basically, the Christian governments got the Jews out of their country. They don't want them. Hitler, he was a good Christian, and I personally believe that was the Second World War on the German front was a Christian crusade to kill off all the Jews. And today, presently, I believe we are suckered into another Christian crusade to declare war against a race of people so that both religions end up killing each other. Let my enemy kill my enemy. And who's going to be on the top? The Illuminati, the very, very, very rich. Now, you also have to look at, when you're examining these things, is the missile that went into the Pentagon. Now, they said it was a plane. There were 80, I think there were 80, something like 85 videos that the CIA, secured. And of them, they only will release 2 views of the supposed plane going into the Pentagon. There are missing frames in those shots, and a person who's much more brilliant than I am at taking these videos apart and actually doctoring them said that he could see where the background had been altered. So the actual video recorded something and it was covered over. But you look at the evidence of the plane, of the damage, and it's a very small hole. There were no wings, there were no engines, there was nothing like that. There was just a very small hole. And you go back up to, and I apologize for drifting around, you go back up to 9/11, and they found an engine there. It just happened to not belong to either one of the designs of the planes that supposedly went into the World Trade Center. So you can see this is a massive cover-up. This is unbelievable. So there's thousands of people involved in this, and there seems to be no end to it. There was no crew, no bodies found, nothing. It just magically blew apart the Pentagon. So now you go up to the one that landed in Pennsylvania. Well, a woman testified she saw a missile with another white ghost plane going with it, like it was guiding it. And she said it crossed overhead, and she said it was no more than 200 feet over the top of her. She said it was not a plane. I know what a plane looks like, because it was not a plane, and it crashed into the field. Now you ask the locals about that massive hole in the ground with the pile of earth. Oh, well, that's where the plane went down. Oh, it was terrible. It just disintegrated. Oh, no bodies, no nothing. Well, yes, the locals, and they say that hole in the ground was there before. And you can go on Google and look up 1999 of that specific area, and you'll find there's the hole. It was just a big lie. So there's a stewardess that wrote a book about the protocol of being able to what people do in the event of a hijacking. And she said there was no protocol being followed. The stewardesses were on the phone talking for half an hour. She says, "You don't do that. You've got people to take care of. You don't sit and talk on the phone." She says, "You listen closely. They're not nervous. They're not upset. There's no people screaming in the background. Oh, here comes the terrorist with the razor blades. Oh, I'm scared." There's nothing like that. And most importantly, and most critical, also critical, is you don't hear any jet engines. She says they were on the ground. She says cell phones do not work in the air. It couldn't have happened. It was a big fraud. And when she was asked, well, what do you think happened to those people that you know the pilots, you know the stewardess, what do you think happened to those people? She says they were killed. This government, that is not us, this government killed those people. This government sat back and killed 3,000 people in the World Trade Center. I thought nothing about it. They killed, their record now is 500,000. This is the biggest mass murder that I can remember. and it's all being swept under the rugs. And it's extremely disturbing to think that these people have declared war on the rest of us. Now, you have to see what else is out there. For the United States, our Constitution was literally dismantled in 1961 under the disarmament agreement for a peaceful world, where they literally gave away our right to defend ourselves, our right to own guns. No more armies. Can you imagine? No more armies. They can do whatever they want to you, and you'd have no way to defend yourself. Under this agreement, the United States doesn't exist anymore. It's just a state under the United Nations. It's just it ceases to be, and that's in 1961. They just gave away the Constitution. So the only thing that we have as citizens in this country to protect us is the Constitution, where I have the right to speak freely on my opinion. Now, it's not about hate, because I don't hate anybody. It's not about religion. I feel sorry for people that are religious, but there's an awful lot of evidence pointing to Israel, which happens to be Jewish. And it's disturbing to think that that they would be involved in this, but they appear to be quite heavily involved. And Benjamin Netanyahu, or whatever, however you pronounce his name, the Prime Minister of Israel at the time, he was talking about 9/11, and reportedly he was said as saying, "It's very good. It's very good. 3,000 people died with these buildings coming down. Oh, that's very good." Then he stopped and he says, "Well, it's not good, but it will generate sympathy for Israel." Really? Is that what it'll do? What it did was it pulled America into an endless war to kill the Islamic people, the Arabs, the Palestinians. It made it okay. It made you and me hate a race of people and a religion that apparently did nothing to us. And it's way too late. I mean, it's well over and done, and they're happy, they're rich. They war profiteers, they made lots of money off of this. And now they're talking about the next war. The next war. Give me a break, what's going on here? Well, Donald Trump talks about, he just recently announced the 6th military branch. Donald, I thought you went to Washington to drain the swamp and reduce government, not make it bigger, and now you're opening up the 6th military. We need more military. Do we really need more military? Well, it happens to be the Space Force. Are you kidding? Is this a joke? The Space Force. We're gonna start fighting with aliens? I thought there was no aliens. Now all of a sudden we got aliens. We got a concern. We need a military to fight off the aliens. Scary. We're just constantly being lied to. Extremely powerful people, extremely rich people. Bill Gates is working diligently to reduce the population growth. The problem apparently is there's too many people on the planet. Too many people on the planet per these people. So, and it's causing all this air pollution and water pollution. You don't understand. It's these people that own the oil companies that are producing so much pollution and toxins when we could have means of forward motion in automobiles by simply using electricity and putting positive charges in those vehicles. Would use absolutely no fossil fuels. And that's 80 years ago. So these people have been controlling it. They caused the problem as far as I'm concerned, and now there are too many people on the world and in the world. That's the problem. Well, Elon Musk has come out in a statement, and he said that in a 5-year time span, artificial intelligence is going to be overtaking the machines. Robots are going to be arbitrarily going around and killing people. Really? That's what's going to happen. Well, that's what they are going to blame. So you'll have a missile flying through there. We don't have any control of that. Oh, it hit the World Trade Center. Oh, it blew up this. Oh, we had no control. It's artificial intelligence is taking over. The robots are taking over. We have a new terror, a new war. All I can say is, don't believe it. Don't believe it. He's saying that this is going to happen at the outside in 10 years. Now, he announced this in 2014. Well, 5 years would be 2019, next year. The outside is 2024. So we have that to look forward to. Rogue, wild robots going around killing people. Or that'll be the excuse. There probably won't be any robots. It'll just be these people. And under the New World Order, under Agenda 21, the United Nations will simply be taking over all the military. So the military, apparently, is going to cease to exist while they step in and take over. So literally, against the Constitution, we are going to have foreign troops on our soil killing us. That's the future. So that's extremely disturbing, but that's what's in the works right now, and that's what appears to be coming in the future. So I don't know how to quite prepare for this, because we in this country have been completely sold out, completely bought and paid for by these super rich. They own it all, and they don't care if you know. It doesn't matter. So if you complain too much, they'll simply silence you. You'll be one of the first to be picked up and taken to the FEMA relocation camps. It's very disturbing. The future does not look good, and I don't see any way out of it other than through understanding. If I tell you, you tell someone else, and we all know. So when you see a hologram in the air, oh, here comes a spaceship, oh, I'm scared to death. You know, it's probably not a spaceship, it's just mirrors and just games being played on us. So the important thing is not to have a knee-jerk reaction. To back up and say, it's the government, it's these people, and they're lying to me, and I'm not going to buy into it. I'm not going to go to the, because of this natural disaster, I'm not going to go to the FEMA relocation camps to get food and water. I'm not going. I'm not going to be vaccinated. I'm not doing it. And I'm not going to evacuate my house. I'm not going to do it. You just simply have to just say no. And if you're in the military, these are your people, and you're going to be killing them. I can't imagine the people who pushed the button in 9/11 and watched all these Americans die, American citizens in the military killing Americans and keeping your mouth shut. You're a traitor if you do that. The news industry, you're not reporting the truth about what you know. You're a traitor to the Constitution. If you're in the if you're a congressman or a senator and you got paid $1 million to keep your mouth shut, you signed a secrecy agreement, you're a traitor. You're a traitor to the Constitution and to the American people, and literally to the world, because you're falsifying, you're lying about everything that has happened here. So I wanted to share with you the things that I've found, and I sincerely hope that it's been beneficial and illuminating. And we have a lot in front of us, and I've only touched the tip of the iceberg as to what's really going on in this nightmare of a government, this communism, this dictatorship that has taken over. And the difference between each one of these people and us is going to be that we are constitutionalists. We will fight and die and defend the Constitution. These people say they will. These polychristians will say, they'll say anything to get to the money. They'll say anything. But the military, they all swore to defend the Constitution. And now you're in this, you signed the secrecy agreement, and now you're going to be out there killing Americans? You could do that? I couldn't do that. Well, they might send me to prison. Send me to prison. I'm not going to kill Americans. Well, we'll get somebody else. And they will. They'll find somebody else to do it. But at least they won't get me. I'm not going to do it. So, in conclusion, I would just like to recap the points that I think are significant in all of this. And there are 8 points that critically lean towards the murder of hundreds of thousands of people by the government that we believe represents us. And the first point is the dustification of the towers. It's very clear when you see what Dr. Judy Wood had completed in her research. And just so we all understand, red iron doesn't turn to dust. If you see any evidence prior to this of skyscrapers that have burned, there's always a skeleton, always. Even in World War II, when they dropped the nuclear bombs in Japan, there was red iron buildings still standing, and they were bent and twisted, but they were still standing. They didn't turn to dust. Iron doesn't turn to dust. Doesn't happen. There's an X factor in there that we don't know and don't understand. But that doesn't mean it's not there just because we don't understand it. So they understand it. The people who did this, the traitors to this country, the murderers, they understand it, but we don't. But people are getting very close to this. And I might be right, I might be completely wrong, but at least I'm looking. I'm looking for it because I know there's an X factor in there. And so does Judy. There's something going on, because she asked, where did the towers go? Well, those particles landed on automobiles, and the energy field was still there and just dissolved these cars. They weren't burned, they were dissolved. If there were a fire like the Al-Qaeda is trying to convince us of, all the paper in the building would have been the first thing to go. and the streets were lined everywhere with paper like this from the towers that didn't burn. It didn't burn because you put a piece of paper in a microwave and the paper won't burn. It'll be just fine. Put a fork in there and you'll start to have explosions. The dust is what I believe is remnants of the red iron and other materials mixed with it. The interesting thing she also points out is the Earth's magnetic field at that time, and we're talking almost those exact hours from 8:30 approximately to 5, the field was altered and there was an intense activity happening at this location. What exactly happened, I don't know. It's a mystery, but something happened, and it wasn't 2 airplanes crashing into a building. It wasn't that. If you listen to the testimony of William Rodriguez, an American hero that went back into the World Trade Center, building number 2, several times and saved people's lives. He was in the basement of building 2 and he heard a massive explosion underneath him, in the parking garage underneath him. A massive explosion. He said it shook the building and it cracked the walls. While he was in the process of removing people, he smelled ammonia and sulfur. Those are ingredients for bombs. There were many explosions that he heard. After the building collapsed, he was taken to an ambulance, and he got out of the ambulance maybe 20 minutes later, and the tires blew out and the ambulance collapsed. Nothing fell on it. There was no fire. His testimony was taken behind closed doors and not shown to the public and not in the 9/11 report. All right? If there isn't a cover-up, why are we doing that? Because there's a cover-up, and it's massive. The Barry Jennings, he was in building number 7, and that building just happened to be investigating the missing $2.5 trillion. That's interesting. All those records disappeared. Huh. And it wasn't hit by anything. And again, fires don't bring buildings straight down. It doesn't happen. He later was found dead without an explanation. There's no certificate of death, and allegedly his entire family has disappeared without a trace. Now, again, everything that I'm finding is possibly hearsay, allegedly, reportedly. I don't know what would ever constitute real in today's world, because there are so many lies out there. But you just have to look at the sheer magnitude of evidence that's pointing against planes actually crashing into the World Trade Center. You have to think of all of this that's going on. Some guy living in a cave in a desert mountain region of the world could do all this? Come on. He can't cover it up. There's other people involved. Now, there's a theory out there that there are no planes. No planes hit the World Trade Center. And I always thought that's ludicrous. That's the stupidest thing I've ever heard of. Until I started to examine it. And I started looking at it a little bit closer. And I'm very skeptical. That's impossible. Well, you have to look up Operation Northwoods. And it is the capability of bringing the United States into war with a country that did absolutely nothing to us for the purpose of going to war. These guys, these psychopaths, they love war. They love to kill people. And this was was in, the Operation Northwoods was in 1962. And they talked about using fake airplanes. So you'd have a pretend airplane leave an airport full of pretend customers, and they're all going on vacation, and it lands in another field when another airplane takes off and goes on, and there's nobody on that plane, and it blows up and crashes into the sea. Oh, look what Cuba did. Oh, they shot down all these people. Oh, they were going to use a boat. No people on the boat. They send the boat over there. Boom, it blows up. Oh, look what Cuba did. We have to invade and get revenge. That's what they did in Vietnam. These planes, passenger airlines have been brought down all the time, specifically for the purpose of getting America to go to war and fight with these people. They're lies. You go back through history, it's all over the place. This Operation Northwoods is everywhere. It happens all the time. Eyewitnesses said that the plane, the second one, because everybody was watching it at that point, the second plane that went into the towers didn't make any sound. Now, it's only a few hundred feet up in the air. It's going to make a hell of a ruckus. We all know that. If you've ever been behind a jet, it'll knock you over. It's deafening. There was no sound. It was reported and shown many times that these planes, that second plane going through the air, had no reflection. Now, there are bright, shiny, polished aluminum planes scooting through the air, and the sunlight would reflect off it as it's moving. It's a bright, sunny day. There should have been shiny spots where it's moving through the air, and it would have reflected the sunlight. You would have seen shine in places. There was no reflection. The other thing was that the plane was recorded traveling at 585 miles an hour. Well, they can travel at that speed in the upper atmosphere because the air is much thinner. But when they get down into the lower atmosphere, where the air is thicker, there's more drag, and they can't go that fast. So a plane traveling at that speed is an impossibility. It can't be done. This is just one more red flag. It can't be done. Another thing that I found extremely relevant was there was no vortex. Now, a vortex is when a plane is flying through the air at great speeds, a vortex comes off the back of the plane and follows the plane. So if it goes through smoke, you'll see a vortex go behind the plane. If it goes through fire, you'll see a vortex. So here's a plane, supposedly, flying at 585 miles an hour. It hits the tower. Tower blows up, and there's no vortex going into those flames. None. Means it wasn't there. This is pretty clear evidence. You look closely, and you can see where this pretend plane cut right through I-beams. The wing tips cut right through I-beams. That doesn't happen. There were no plane parts. It should have hit the wall and fallen down to the ground. It went right into the wall. It doesn't happen. That doesn't happen. That means it was a fake plane. It was an illusion. It was a hologram. And that really makes a lot of sense. And just to give you an example, they reported an engine was found laying on the ground later on. And when somebody did an investigation as to that engine didn't belong to either one of those two planes. It wasn't manufactured for those planes. It belonged to a different plane. It's just massive cover-up. Think of all the people that are involved in this. The explosion of of Trade Center 2, the metal was blown out, not in, which means it was an internal explosion. Later on, passports were found in pristine condition and just happened to belong to these terrorists? Come on. No bodies were found, but a passport laying on the ground. Oh, look, the terrorists did it. Oh, yeah, we caught them, yeah. Another really disturbing part is the E-team, Israeli artists. They had access to both buildings, construction levels, materials. They could do anything they wanted. They lived there for 4 years. 4 years. That's a lot of time to wire everything up so that it will explode. There's evidence of boxes of BB-18 fuse holders. All right, you're in the fuse holder building business, and you sell these fuses to demolition companies. You sell them to rock quarries. You sell them to maybe the military, and that's it. Now along comes the E-team, Israeli artists, and they want a couple of thousand boxes, and you deliver them to the World Trade Center. That isn't a red flag. They didn't notify the FBI. Hey, what are these guys doing with this stuff? This is really creepy. You know, a company sold them, somebody took the order, a delivery man delivered the boxes, and no red alerts. Just more of the cover. So how can you, as a truck driver, a delivery person, deliver what you know are used strictly for blowing things up to a downtown building and not have some remorse over what you've done? I mean, you did this for a paycheck and you don't come forward. You didn't warn the police. You didn't do anything. You know, how do you sleep at night knowing all those souls are that blood is on your hands? How do you do it? What kind of a paycheck could you have gotten that would have been worth it? And for Benjamin, good old Benjamin, all he could think of for all those lost souls was, well, this is good. Yeah, it's good for Israel, and that's all we care about. We don't care about people that don't live in Israel, I guess. It just reveals so much evil that is in these people. The 5 dancing Israelis that were recording the explosion, the planes going into the towers, had set up and were there before it happened. How did they know? I guess everybody in Israel knows. They must have put it in the newspapers and said, hey, you know, I've got tour buses going to watch the Trade Center go down. Yeah, that's a great thing. That's how do you justify that? What kind of people are you? Well, you're not people. I don't know what you are, but you're not human beings. You can't be. You're something completely different. The Pentagon missile. Now, they claimed a plane went into the Pentagon. An eyewitness, a professional newsman, saw it, and he said it was not an airplane, it was a missile. There was a ghost white plane along with it, as though it was helping to guide it in on its path. Again, it was flying way too fast for a regular plane, and when it crashed, there were no plane parts, no bodies, no luggage, and just a small hole in the wall. Now, there were 85 videos, allegedly, picked up by the CIA, and out of all those videos, they could only release one, and that's suspicious, and the others are all top secret. Okay, the one that they released, it was examined by somebody who does this for a living, and they said there were frames missing, and the background in one of the frames had been altered, so as though to cover up something that was there before. The interesting part is that specific part of the Pentagon was in the process of doing an investigation to try to find out what happened to the $2.5 trillion that had disappeared. So now you got building number 7, same thing. They were investigating the money there, and it wasn't hit. Nothing happened that caused this building to collapse that we're being told. And you have the Pentagon, same thing. Then, so you could see that's pretty compelling evidence. Rebecca Ruth wrote a book called Methodical Illusion, and she is a retired stewardess, and at the time of 9/11 she said she was within hours of being on those planes. She knew the pilots, the co-pilots, the stewardesses. She knew these people, and she said there's absolutely no doubt in her mind those people, those planes were on the ground. They weren't real planes. She says the 2 stewardesses were on the plane, one in the front, one in the back, talking on the phone, talking on cell phones, and reporting all these events going on. And she says the cell phones don't work in the air. They don't work. There's no towers up in the sky. She said they talked for 25 minutes approximately. Well, they got jobs to do. They're busy doing stuff. They're not just sitting there going for a ride. They're not passengers. And she said they don't sit and talk for 25 minutes on the phone. She says if you pay close attention, you don't hear people in the background screaming and hollering and panicking over the terrorists. You just hear her voice. And she says if you listen real close, you don't hear jet engines. There's no engines. She believes they were murdered by the CIA, by this government, to cover it all up so we would go to war and kill innocent men, women, and children, I guess for fun and profit. I don't get it. I am just not one of those kinds of people. The last thing I want to talk about is Flight 93. A witness driving down the highway saw a missile fly over the top of her. She says it was not a plane, it was a missile. And when she tried to report it to the FBI, the man questioning her says, oh, well, you don't know what an airplane looks like. I guess because she's a hillbilly living out in the sticks, she doesn't know what an airplane looks like. She knows what an airplane looks like. And she said it was a missile. Also, a ghost white plane going along with it, guiding it along. The people that first arrived at the scene said there was no plane, no parts of a plane, no tail, no wings. There was nothing. You know, the first responders, they know what a plane crash looks like. There's pieces of broken plane. There's fireballs, there's luggage, there's body parts. Nothing. Then, if you go online and you look up, you do a Google of that space, that particular location before 9/11, and say you go in 1999 and you look up that plot of land, and you'll see what all the locals are telling everybody, that hole in the ground was there before. So you can see, from my point of view, the sheer magnitude of lies and deception clearly point in one direction. And we, as Americans, as other countries that were pulled into this, went to war. Our people died for nothing. This was a lie. You know, I estimated it at over 500,000, and that's just my guesstimate because I'm not being told the truth. All these innocent men, women, and children killed, military killed, the expense, it all went to enrich the military organization that is owned by the banks, that is owned by the Illuminati and I guess 11 families. That seems to be the pyramid. And these people at the very top have all said openly that they want to reduce the population by 90%. So I guess it's all our fault that all the air has been burned up with motor oil and gasoline and all the pollution on the planet is our fault, when in fact they're the ones that sell the stuff. So it's a very bad situation, and it needs to be looked at more in-depthly. And you can trust the government. The government is not on our side. You're not going to get truth. You're not going to get justice from the government. It has to come from us as people, constitutionalists. I honestly believe it takes a village to raise a child, and it's going to take the world to sort through what they did. And hopefully the next time they try to do it, we're not all going to step in line and just go along with what they say, because we know this proves that they lied to all of us. Everyone in the world was sucked into this and lied to. All that hatred generated at the Muslim population is erroneous. It's wrong. And I feel personally very bad that I participated in that. And I'm not any longer. I truly get it. I understand what they did. And it can't, everything that I presented here at the closing, it can't all be wrong. It can't be. You know, logic and reasoning says something's dirty here. Even if it's just 25% of it is accurate, that's more than enough for me. We were all lied to. I sincerely hope this video helps you. It helped me to go through it, and I hope the information I pass along to you is beneficial, and hopefully you will take this information and share it with other people and do your own research, and maybe you'll discover something that I missed, and we can keep passing on this knowledge, sharing it with each other, and eventually get to what really happened. What did this government really do to the American people? We need to know. Thank you again for watching.